but this is your last chance to turn things around. And
It wasn't a loud laugh. It wasn't the kind of belly laugh you hear in a barber shop or the joyous eruption of a family reunion. It was something far more corrosive. It was a dry, brittle sound, like dead leaves scraping against pavement. A chuckle, a dismissal wrapped in a noise. I sat there, 17 years old, hands folded in my lap, trying to keep my breathing even. The air in Mr. Henderson's office always smelled like stale coffee and old paper, a scent I came to associate with the suffocation of dreams. I had just said the words out loud for the first time. I want to apply to the engineering program at MIT. I said it clearly. I didn't stutter. And his reaction wasn't anger. It wasn't confusion. It was amusement. That hurt more than any shout could have. The laughter implied that the very concept of me, a block boy from this zip code, with these shoes, with this history, belonging in a space of high innovation, was inherently a joke. He looked at me over the rim of his glasses, the silence stretching out after his chuckle died down, and I felt the heat rising up the back of my neck. It's a specific kind of heat. It's the burning sensation of having your reality denied right to your face. He didn't see the late nights. He didn't see the calculus textbooks I read under the covers. He saw a statistic. He saw a quota that didn't need to be filled. He saw a ceiling where I saw a sky. And in that moment, the office felt like a courtroom where the verdict had been delivered before the trial even began.
Doubt is a parasite. It doesn't kill you immediately. It feeds on you. It starts in the gut and works its way up to the mind. Walking down those hallways, I started to do the math. I was always good at math, but this was a different kind of calculation. I started calculating the probability of him being right. What if I was delusional? What if the aptitude I felt inside was just arrogance? The world spends a lot of time telling Black men who we are before we get a chance to introduce ourselves. We are told we are athletes or entertainers or threats. We are rarely told we are architects of the future. The echo of my footsteps on the linoleum sounded like a countdown. Every step felt heavier than the last. I looked at the other students passing by, some laughing, some fighting, some just surviving, and I wondered if they had already accepted the ceilings placed above their heads. Henderson's laugh replayed in my head on a loop. It was a frequency that disrupted my focus. I found myself looking at my hands, wondering if they were built for equations or for labor. It's a dangerous thing when an authority figure tells you that your ambition is a fantasy. You start to treat your own potential like a foreign object, something to be expelled rather than nurtured. But beneath the doubt, there was something else. A small, hard knot of resistance. A quiet voice that whispered, "He doesn't know you." But God, the noise of his laughter was loud.
The institutional wall isn't made of bricks. It's made of silence. It's made of being overlooked. It's the hand raised that never gets called on. It's the correct answer that gets attributed to someone else. In physics class, I knew the velocity. I knew the friction coefficients. I understood the mechanics of the world better than I understood the mechanics of this school. But to them, I was invisible until I was a problem. If I spoke too loud, I was aggressive. If I stayed too quiet, I was disengaged. If I excelled, I was an anomaly. There is a psychological toll to constantly having to audition for your own humanity. You spend so much energy just trying to prove you belong in the room that you have less energy left to actually do the work. I watched the teacher praise a mediocre answer from a student whose father was on the school board, while my derivation sat on my notebook page, perfect and unseen. This was the ecosystem Henderson was protecting. He wasn't just a gatekeeper. He was the maintenance man for a machine designed to sort us into piles. Us in the labor pile, them in the leader pile. And the most insidious part was that they called it guidance. They called it being realistic. They wrapped their bias in the language of concern. We just don't want you to be disappointed, Marcus. As if my disappointment was their fear, rather than my success being their threat.
The second meeting wasn't about laughter. It was about warfare. I brought my list. He brought his red pen. There is something violent about seeing your dreams crossed out in red ink. He didn't just suggest safety schools, he insisted on them. He told me that applying to the top tier was a waste of application fees. He told me I was taking a spot from someone who had the pedigree. That was the word he used, pedigree. As if we were dogs. As if intelligence was a bloodline trait that skipped my neighborhood. I looked him in the eye. It's hard to look a grown man in the eye when he holds your future in his hands, but I forced myself to do it. I told him I wasn't asking for his permission. I was asking for my transcripts. He leaned back, the leather of his chair creaking like a warning. He told me I was being difficult. He told me I was setting myself up for a fall that would break me. He used words like hubris and overreach. But what he really meant was know your place. The air in the room was so thick you could choke on it. I realized then that his job wasn't to help me ascend, it was to manage my descent. He wanted me to land softly in mediocrity so he wouldn't have to deal with the anomaly of my success. I took the paper back. The red lines looked like scars across the names of the universities. I folded the paper, put it in my pocket, and said, "Send the transcripts." My voice didn't shake this time.
You cannot survive the cold without a fire. Mr. Davids was that fire. He was the physics teacher who saw the math, not the mask. He found me in the library when the janitors were starting to buffer the floors. He didn't ask me if I was realistic. He asked me if I was ready to work. We spent hours dissecting my personal statement. He told me, "Marcus, they will try to read you as a tragedy. Don't let them. Write yourself as a triumph." We worked on the syntax of my life. We structured the narrative of my resilience. He told me stories of his own battles in academia, the professors who wouldn't make eye contact, the labs where he was the only face of color. He validated my reality. That is the most powerful thing a mentor can do. Simply confirm that you aren't crazy, that the resistance you feel is real, that the wind is indeed blowing against you, but that you are aerodynamic enough to cut through it. He looked at my equations and treated them with the reverence they deserved. He didn't laugh. He didn't scoff. He demanded more. He pushed me harder than Henderson ever did, but he pushed me up, not down. In that pool of yellow light, surrounded by the smell of books, I remembered that I came from a lineage of builders, of thinkers, of men who made a way out of no way. Henderson was a gatekeeper, but Davids gave me the lockpick. The wait is a void. It is a silence that screams. After the applications are sent, after the essays are polished, after the submit button is clicked, you are left with nothing but the echo of your own audacity. Winter turned to spring, and the silence from the universities felt heavy. Every day I checked the mailbox. Every hour I refreshed the inbox. The doubt came back, creeping in during the quiet hours of the night. I replayed Henderson's laugh. Maybe he knew something I didn't. Maybe the system was rigged in a way I couldn't outsmart. Maybe I was just another kid from the block who aimed too high and would crash back down to earth, bruised and embarrassed. The fear of proving him right was nauseating. It wasn't just about college anymore. It was about dignity. It was about the right to define my own worth. I walked through the school hallways like a ghost, suspended between two worlds, the one they expected me to inhabit and the one I was trying to force open. I saw Henderson in the hall a few times. He didn't ask. He just gave me that tight, pitying smile. The smile that says, "I told you so," before the verdict is even in. I held my breath for 3 months. I think my soul was holding its breath. They say the universe speaks in signs. That day, the sign was a thick envelope. The thin ones are rejections. Everyone knows that. The thick ones contain a new life. I stood in my kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the house. My hands were shaking so bad I almost tore the letter inside. I remembered the texture of the paper, heavy, expensive bond paper. I pulled it out. "Dear Marcus." The words blurred for a second. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Congratulations." The word hit me like a physical blow. The air rushed back into my lungs. The weight I had been carrying,
the weight of Henderson's doubt, the weight of history, the weight of the neighborhood's eyes. It all evaporated. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just sat down on the floor and wept. It wasn't just acceptance to a school. It was validation of my sanity. It was proof that my internal compass was true, even when the map makers tried to tell me I was lost. I read the letter 4 times. Full scholarship, engineering. The door was open. The gatekeeper had failed. I didn't go back to gloat. Gloating is for the insecure. I went back to testify. I walked into his office, and the smell of stale coffee didn't make me nauseous anymore. It just smelled like the past. He looked up, expecting a request, expecting a defeat. I didn't say a word. I just placed the letter on his desk. He picked it up. I watched his eyes scan the header. I saw the moment the realization hit him. His eyebrows knit together. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He looked for a mistake. He looked for a reason to dismiss it. But the ink was indelible. He looked at me, and for the first time in 4 years, he didn't look down on me. He looked confused. He looked like a man whose entire worldview had just been disproven by a sheet of paper. "I thought you should update my file," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice of a man who no longer needed permission. The silence that followed wasn't his silence anymore. It was mine. I owned the room. I owned the moment. I realized then that his laughter never had any power over me, except the power I gave it. And I had taken it all back.